Hello and welcome to Mansion Interviews, a podcast which gives me an excuse to talk to interesting people while at the same time improving your English. When I was in Manchester this year for the New Media Europe conference, I was lucky enough to meet a great guy called Ryan Sink. Ryan's so nice to be around. He's the kind of person who makes you feel comfortable and relaxed as soon as you meet him. It's just a shame that we didn't have a lot of time to talk more at the conference, and also that we happen to live in different countries. So, I jumped on Skype with Ryan after the conference, and that's what you're going to hear now. A Mansion interview with Ryan Sink from businessenglishqa.com. Remember, you can improve your listening with comprehension questions and find some help with difficult words from this interview at inglespodcast.com/Ryan. That's RYAN. Hey Ryan, it's really good to speak to you again. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me here today.
Have you been busy since you returned from sunny Manchester?
Yes, very busy from not so sunny Manchester, actually. But it was nice to be inside all weekend. Yeah, I mean, that really kick-started a whole new phase of business for me. So I've been doing a lot of thinking. And how have you been now that you have an award-winning podcast? I don't know if your audience knows, but Craig and the English podcast won the 2015 UK Podcasters Award for Best Education Podcast.
Actually, thank you for mentioning it, but I think my listeners know very well because that's all I've spoken about since I've been back. Thanking my audience.
Congratulations again.
Thank you, Ryan. That means a lot. So on his podcast at businessenglishqa.com, Ryan here interviews non-native English-speaking professionals, and he has people from all over the world on his podcast, from Mexico, Italy, Turkey, Poland, Holland. And Ryan, that guy from Turkey, who I listened to yesterday, living in Russia, in Moscow.
Yeah, John.
Is it John? His English was wonderful, man. It was really, really clear. His English, I think, is better than mine. I mean,
yeah, I think it really helped that he grew up with a family that also used English together. You know, he grew up with a mother who taught the English language, and his family actually used English as a second language together along with Turkish. And so that really helped him out. And he went to an English-speaking school.
Yeah, and his father was a diplomat. He traveled around a lot. So fantastic English from that guy. I wanted to ask you, though, because you've been interviewing these non-native English-speaking professionals who most of them live now in other countries, what have you found in common with these people that you've interviewed who have learned a second language and then gone to live in another country? Do you feel some kind of connection with them?
Yeah, I have started to see some commonalities. You know, I mean, the original point of this entire podcast was an investigation. It was sort of just like a hobby for me to figure out from non-native speakers what's working for them, because all I knew as an English teacher is what was taught to me, you know, with the grammar and here's how it works. But I wanted to know from their side, besides coming and doing lessons and courses, what other things were really working for them. And so far, I really see a common theme with making life decisions that really put you in a place where you're immersed. Now, this doesn't have to mean that you are actually in an English-speaking country, which a lot of people think, but even if you're in Spain like yourself, just to make decisions to create an English world around yourself. And the people who have done that have really been successful. And you can hear them on the podcast, like you said with John. I mean, some of them speak English better than a lot of native speakers that I know.
He actually said, John, I think total immersion, just immersing and putting yourself totally in the culture and the language is probably the best way to, and the quickest way to improve your English and get up to that level.
Yeah, and the culture has a lot to do with it. I think as well, because English is so big, it's really important to figure out what kind of English you want to learn and what your goals are with that. So if you are looking to do more business with people from the United Kingdom, then really try to make sure everything around you is more of that kind of English. Or if it's business English, really create your own little niche of the English language as well.
Ryan, you went to Germany to live around, I think it was 2007. What's been the most difficult thing for you about living in Germany and adapting to German culture?
Well, at first, I moved to Berlin, which wasn't so much of a culture shock. If you're in a big city like Berlin, then it's really very much like being in a big or even a mid-sized city in the United States. So that wasn't too much of a change. But now I live in Munich, and that was quite a jump. I would say the two things that were most difficult to adjust to over here were the times when different shops are open. So in America, I'm used to things being open even 24 hours a day, like supermarkets, grocery stores, for example. But here, you really have to schedule when you want to buy things, or else you'll probably miss their opening times and not have any groceries for the weekend. And I actually had that happen to me where there was a weekend connected to the Christmas holiday, and I went several days having to go out and sit in a restaurant to eat anything because I didn't have anything at home. And the other huge difference I see here is water. And that sounds like such a simple thing, but in the United States, I was used to having water available and free wherever I went. So if you're at an airport or a mall there, it's really easy to find a water fountain. And a lot of water fountains also are set up to fill water bottles, not only for drinking while you're there. And a lot of Americans actually bring a water bottle around with them. Or if you're at a restaurant, it's very common to have water brought to you at the very beginning of a meal, and they keep your glass full and it's always free. But here in Germany, it's been very difficult because you go to a restaurant and often you spend more money on the water you order per glass than you do on even alcoholic drinks. If you want a beer, the beer is very often cheaper than water at restaurants here. And if you're out and about, it's really hard to find that, especially for a low price or even
That's interesting. I had no idea that the water was like that in Germany. But I mean, you can drink the water straight from the tap or the faucet, as you would say. And the water's okay. Can you ask for like a glass of tap water or
you can, but you probably won't be able to do that without receiving some dirty looks. I think a lot of waiters here think that asking for tap water with your meal is just a way to get around giving them any sort of money or gratuity on top of that.
Really?
Yeah. So if you order a coffee, very often with your coffee, you'll get water, a small glass of water. That's no problem. And if you ask for tap water, they'll still often bring it to you, but they won't do it happily. We'll just say that.
That's interesting. I mean, I've walked into many bars in Spain during the summer when it's very hot just to drink tap water. And they're usually quite friendly. They understand it's hot and they'll just give me a free glass of water to drink and I'll walk out again. But I couldn't do that in Germany. I wouldn't be well received.
Exactly. Especially if that's the only thing you're going to get while you're there. You'd be much better off knocking on someone's door of their home and asking if you could have a water.
But also with the shop opening times, I had the same problem when I first came to Spain because they close, many shops closed for the siesta, which is usually between 1:30 or 2 and 4, 4:30. So because I lived a little outside of the center, I'd go into the center in the morning to do stuff. And suddenly, if I didn't get everything done, everything would close. And here's me walking around for 2.5 hours in the sun or just sitting somewhere waiting for the shops to open again in the afternoon, which is really frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this to you at the conference last weekend, but My first stop after leaving the United States was Barcelona. And so even before I got to Germany, I experienced the Spanish culture, and that as well was very difficult for me. I had my camera break, for example, within my first couple of days there, and I could never get to the camera shop when they were open because of the siestas, and because that was the only time that the school I was at would let us go out and have a break. So that was really
Right.
impossible.
You did your English certification in Barcelona, didn't you, to be an English teacher?
Exactly. That's where I
Why
got my
did
TESOL certificate.
why did you decide to do that in Barcelona?
Actually, before I signed up for a course, I did a lot of research. And if you're going to get TESOL certified, you can do that pretty much anywhere. There are online courses. You can go to a local university or community college. And then there are also schools around the world, like the one I went to, which was through EuroTEFL. And these locations have face-to-face training, and then also you get experience teaching non-native speakers there as well. And so that for me was a huge advantage. And then on top of that, my ultimate goal was to get to Germany as my first stop in my world trip that ended up just being a one continent trip. um, and the person running the course in Barcelona had just come from Berlin where he was teaching, and he had a lot of connections there. And so basically, I ended up taking a lot of his former clients when I got to Berlin, and he really set me up there.
What were your impressions of Barcelona as a city?
I loved my time there. It was so great. I think you have to be a little bit careful as a tourist. You have to be really smart about, making
Yeah.
sure your belongings are always not only in sight, but that you really have physical contact with that, and maybe that you're also with a group. Not that it's dangerous, but a lot of people at the school with me were robbed, unfortunately. So you do have to be careful there. But the city is beautiful. I had a great time there. And it was really interesting for me to see how the people in Catalonia, how they see the rest of Spain. And even then, before all of these votes and everything, back in 2007, they were very, very stubborn about this is Catalonia, this is not Spain. And there were even signs that you could see throughout the city that said, France is 1,000 kilometers in this direction, and Spain is a couple hundred kilometers in this direction. And I can't speak Spanish, but a lot of the people I lived with, we would go out together, and when they ordered in Spanish, the people would only speak Catalan back to them.
Yeah, that happened to me once. I was traveling north of Barcelona with my Spanish girlfriend at the time, and we sat down to eat in a restaurant. The menu was in Castellano, Spanish, but the waitress spoke to us in Catalan. And it was obvious that me being English, I didn't know Catalan, but she wouldn't change to Castellano. She wouldn't change to Castellano Spanish.
Even though she
Uh,
recognized you weren't a native Spanish speaker.
exactly. It was a point of pride with her. So it's an interesting part of the world, Catalonia.
And unfortunately, I didn't get to see Barcelona before the Olympics. I heard that it was quite different there, but a lot of people talk about how they really made a jump from the Olympic Games to become a real international player. And you can see that in, the architecture there and the life, the day-to-day life.
And of course, now they have the World Mobile Congress there every year, which has really put Barcelona and Spain on the map in the technology world as well. I think that's in February. What's your favorite Spanish dish, Ryan?
I think the best thing I had in Barcelona was paella.
Fish or meat, was it? You remember?
It was with fish. So I had it, yeah, it was right there on the water, a little restaurant there with mussels and shrimp and squid and lots of different things in there. And it was just delicious. I don't know what they put in it, if it's saffron or something, what makes it really yellow, but it was so nice.
Yeah, you can't beat a good Spanish paella. What's your favorite German dish?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I think just my favorite simple dish is especially something that's very easy to find throughout Germany and Austria is schnitzel. You know, you can go to any stand here, even street vendors are always selling schnitzel. You can get chicken schnitzel or veal or pork, so whatever kind of meat you want, and you can get it with potato salad, which is more of a vinegar potato salad with cucumber in it, or you can just get it in a roll with something on it, like ketchup, for example. But
Yeah.
that's definitely my go-to meal when I'm on my way somewhere.
That sounds really good. So you've been like living in Germany obviously for quite a few years. What do you miss anything about the States? I mean, do you miss the sports, the TV, the food, the consumer lifestyle of choice and customer service, or anything else about your home country?
Yeah, I think, with anyone who lives where they're not from, I think you always miss some things. But I have to say that the more or the longer I'm here in Europe and especially in Germany, the more it becomes like the United States. I think there's a lot of influence from that direction. And so the mentality, especially, I see really starting to change also in the business life. And I really enjoy that. Like I mentioned before, the water, the opening hours, things like that, especially holiday time, vacation time, bank holidays, that's really difficult to adjust to if you're from a country like I am, where there are no religious bank holidays. and the schools aren't year round, not always year round like they are here. So you have these huge summer gaps in America for 3 months, whereas here it's about a 6 week summer vacation and other shorter ones throughout the year. So a lot of this takes some getting used to, but you learn a lot about the Catholic Church. And like I mentioned before, a lot of this is changing slowly but surely, and especially in Germany with this influx of foreigners. I think at the moment for all of Europe, this topic of refugees is very big. And especially here in Germany, you see how this is starting to change how people think, instead of just, hey, this is Germany, this is a place for German people, of more, hey, we're an international, multicultural nation and we have to start thinking like that.
I think you're going to be very busy over the next few years, Ryan, teaching all these newcomers English. A whole new sector opening up.
That's what I was thinking
I'm
is
sure they're very ambitious. They're very hardworking. They're very keen to become successful in Germany, and they're going to need really good business English. So good luck with you.
Yeah, I think it's a lot
teaching
of
them all
polishing. I
English.
mean, I thought the same thing originally, that man, all these people are going to need English just from zero.
Exactly.
But from what I've heard, actually, a lot of them can speak the English language pretty well. But like a lot of German people, they're going to need polishing. They're going to really need to work on certain things to bring them into this business life here. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, and that's what you do. You take somebody who maybe can speak a little bit of English, and you help them become more successful in their professional business life. Could you tell the listeners what you're offering online and how you're helping business professionals, apart from obviously listening practice on your podcast?
Yeah, so at the moment, here in Munich, I have a physical location where I help people, like you said, who are already somewhat fluent in the language, and just to help them work on polishing their language. And now I also, in addition to having my podcast, do coaching online as well with people around the world. But it's the same idea. It's taking people who can speak the language, and instead of teaching them how the language works, because the people I work with often know a lot about how the English language works, we focus on polishing how they present themselves, how they present their companies, how they give a specific presentation if they're going to, pitch a new business idea. So really getting into the nitty gritty of explaining what they want to explain clearly and easily, so that that listener, whoever they're presenting to, understands as easily as possible.
That sounds very useful for anyone looking to improve their English and become more effective in the business world. What plans do you have for the future regarding your services online? I mean, can you see that? Can you see yourself expanding and going into different areas?
I think my focus at the moment is really more on trying to find all of these new resources out there to help people learn and improve their English as much as possible, and especially as quickly as possible. I think, we're finding every year that time is even more limited. There's so many different ways to spend your time. And so I'm always looking for cool new apps and platforms and courses out there that can help people improve as quickly as possible. And then my goal is to really bring these as much as possible to the listeners of the podcast or anyone I'm connected to out there. So really connect learners with new resources.
So are we talking here about resources and technology and apps specifically for improving English, concentrating on the language, or maybe more sort of time management and general business applications?
It could be
or both.
Yeah, it could be both. Just like you said, I mean, it doesn't have to be specifically for learning or improving English, but I'm trying to always provide things where, like I said earlier, they have the possibility, they have the opportunity to immerse themselves as well. So if it is a resource that's helping them with a specific skill, like take Microsoft Office, for example, I might put something up there that really helps people learn how to work with Word and Excel. But at the same time, this is a resource that I know is very clear. It's all in English. And by learning that and improving those skills, they'll be improving their English skills simultaneously. And I think those are often even more valuable when you get people not focusing on learning the language. They get this indirect learning.
Exactly, especially if they're engaged and they're interacting with and they're interested in what they're doing, then I think the English improves as a byproduct almost.
Exactly,
which is wonderful. But they have to be engaged and interested in what they're doing. Ryan, I can't say goodbye to you before asking you one question. I saw on your website that you've worked as a singer.
Yes, I have. So I actually...
Is that professionally or?
Yeah, I studied vocal music. So I did 4 years at Furman University in South Carolina studying vocal music. I was on scholarship there. And in college and afterwards a little bit too, I was involved in lots of different groups from, classical music to a cappella. And I have experience with that, with recording that, and a lot of this was paid, but most of that was paid to help me get through college and not to support my life after college.
But do you still sing today?
I sing pretty much every day to an audience of 2. I have a 6-month-old daughter and a 2.5-year-old son, and they're always willing to listen. Although sometimes especially my son does tell me to stop singing, Dad.
Starts crying, does he?
So they're not always a happy audience, but for the most part, they really enjoy listening to that. But I was in a group here in Munich, a local group, but I haven't been able to find the time for that anymore. But that is one of my goals. You're asking about things down the road. I would like to get into singing more as a hobby, not as a profession.
Right. So will we be hearing you maybe singing something on the podcast anytime soon? Maybe the introduction to Business English Q&A?
Yeah, I've thought about that as well. I started listening to podcasts with Pat Flynn and his Smart Passive Income. And I was sort of inspired by him because some of his intros are actually him singing different things, and so
rapping, and it's fantastic. And he does a different rap or a different thing every podcast, which is really good.
Yeah, and I think sometime down the road you'll probably hear that on mine as well. But we'll see.
Oh man, I'll be listening every week. I'll be listening every week, hoping that you'll break into song during your podcast.
Yeah, if you come on and sing with me, then we'll do it.
Well, we don't want to lose your audience, Ryan, so I'll politely decline. So you can find Ryan's podcast at businessenglishqa.com, and there'll be obviously links and notes in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/Ryan. That's RYAN. Where else can people find you, Ryan?
Well, for people who are interested in getting some feedback on how they're working on improving their English, they can email me directly at ryanlsink. So that's RYANLSINK at gmail.com. This is my personal email address. Nothing gets to me faster. And if you email me there, you can ask me, any questions you may have. But also, at the moment, I'm giving the first 25 people who contact me a 15-minute consultation for free. So you get 15 minutes of my time, and we'll just talk about what you're doing at the moment and how you can adjust that to improve even more quickly.
That sounds wonderful. So I'm sure lots of people out there will be interested in that. And what occurs to me that if you have a job interview in English on your horizon, or maybe you're giving a presentation in English, then why not jump on to Skype with Ryan and have a consultation with him? I'm sure he'll be able to help you to get that job or produce that successful presentation.
Definitely. I'd love to help.
Ryan, thanks for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to being in touch with you very soon.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. It was my pleasure.
A huge thank you to Ryan for spending the time with me. And thank you to you for listening to this podcast. You can check out Ryan's wonderful website and his podcast at businessenglishqa.com. All links from this episode, as usual, can be found in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/Ryan. And for a free 15-minute consultation with Ryan, you can email him at ryanlsink@gmail.com. You can find more podcasts to improve your English at inglespodcast.com, and you can study English free at mansioningles.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes and give us some iTunes love. A few of those lovely stars and maybe a short review so that more people can find our podcasts.